It is only possible from our level of existence to alter a unique genetic pattern. Add, subtract, substitute, etc. It is completely impossible for man to create a unique genetic sequence. We can't create at that level. We can't write a new entity from scratch. The complexity and the amount of information, the number of variables, the interactions and structure, everything about it is completely beyond our level of intelligence and capability, and always will be. No matter how intelligent we become, we'll never be able to create something new genetically, really new, from scratch, like writing a new song or story. We can only scramble up what we find down here already. The actual creation of unique living entities, creatures, happens at a level above this material universe, or dimension, or whatever you want to call it. A level permanently out of the reach of man. It's an operation that is an order of magnitude above ours, in terms of complexity, intelligence, or whatever. We just can't do it. So, unique genetic patterns are valuable. People, viable living entities are valuable. Novelty is valuable. It's invaluable. It represents potential, the future, a new potential timeline. One person could change everything. So, unique genetic patterns are invaluable. If you have unlimited money in terms of resources, the next level is time. If you have unlimited time, once you achieve that level of mastery over material nature, the next wall you hit with unlimited time is novelty. With unlimited money, unlimited time, eventually you will exhaust every satisfying, gratifying possibility. You will exhaust every variable in eternity in material nature. You need more variables. So the next level of resource after money and time is novelty, new variables. And novelty is represented by genetics. You need new genetics. And some may think that novelty can be manufactured technologically. This is false. And possibly go into it later. But basically all technology exists from the beginning. Or you could just say all technology continuously exists from cycle to cycle. And all that is actually advancing is our understanding of what is possible. But the actual capability never changes, only our understanding. And there is always a designated, segregated control group that retains the full understanding of that technological capability and passes that baton on to the incoming control group at the crossover point between cycles. So, every embryo that can be created represents a viable, possible alternative timeline in the form of a new, unique genetic sequence. It is a resource that cannot be created. It can only be harvested. And a timeline is always connected to a specific genetic sequence or person. The reason it represents an untapped potential timeline or world or reality is because the effect that each new person has on the timeline is virtually infinite. It's uncountable in its effect. Introducing a new person even if it seems like the person never does anything society would consider significant, the ripple effect or butterfly effect or whatever from their existence, no matter what, would have billions of different effects that trickle down to create a completely different world. So it's an invaluable resource, genetics. It's like manna from heaven. And each pairing of people producing these embryos are producing a virtually infinite resource as far as potential timelines or realities or worlds. Not truly infinite, because they will never produce a child or potential child that a different couple combination of parents would produce. But each pairing represents a discrete pool of virtually infinite possibilities, or novelty. So each pairing is its own discrete pool of a spectrum of possible timelines. Each pairing of people represents a spectrum of potential timelines. It's not truly infinite, because each couple will never produce a child or potential child that a different couple would produce. But you could imagine two parents, no matter how many children they have, they're never going to produce literally the exact same child twice, genetically, except for identical twins, but that's a whole separate other tangent. But there are other limitations imposed by nature as well, like the number of eggs a woman can produce. And this spiritual, higher level process cannot be simulated or imitated technologically, even with genetic samples of both parties, because there is an infinite improbability injected into the actual process, which cannot be mimicked, understood, or accounted for through so-called mutations or inexplicable changes which are unpredictable. One way or another, the physical pairing must actually occur. This is what makes unique genetic sequences invaluable. And by physical pairing, I mean, like, you could take like sperm and egg and combine them in vitro in a lab or something, but you couldn't take, for example, just like a blood sample or a skin or saliva sample or something like that and create a viable embryo from that. You need one way or another the actual reproductive material, and the most reliable way is to just engineer an actual liaison between two people. That's still the primary method, obviously. But within each genetic pairing, the potential change and variation that could result in reality from the introduction of those embryos as living people in the world is virtually infinite. It's uncountable, the influence it could have. And that limit could be pushed as far as number of sperm and eggs produced and viable embryos produced with chemicals, hormones, and other technological or other means. But only to a certain point. There's still an inherent natural limit. But if you imagine that you had sufficiently powerful simulator, virtual reality, probabilistic system modeling technologies that in combination basically amount to a quote-unquote what-if machine type of immersive experience with time dilation, etc., the whole thing. Then these unique genetic patterns would be very valuable to you because they would represent new potential worlds, unrealized timelines, new variables. And if you had unlimited resources, energy, and unlimited time, that unique input of genetic patterns, embryos, potential people, would be the limiting factor. It would be the bottleneck on your satisfaction or gratification. With enough time, you exhaust every possible scenario of sense gratification. If you're a virtually immortal demigod. So that element of novelty is what becomes most valuable. And the element of novelty as a resource is incorporated and encapsulated materially in the form of embryos, the genetic material. The higher than any material resource is the resource of novelty, and the tangible currency of that resource is embryos. That is the tangible currency of the intangible resource of novelty. It's represented in the currency of embryos, unique genetic sequences. So the genetic material, the embryos, the human resource is a divine resource. So now you can imagine each genetic coupling of parents can produce these sets of embryos that collectively represent this whole spectrum of potential alternate reality timelines in these what-if simulator systems. And you can look and see the different possibilities each pairing of people represents, all totally different potential realities. Also, side note, the virtually immortal demigods, the demigods' genetics eventually break down and decompose over time and require, because they far exceed their allotted natural time or lifespan. So because of that, because of far exceeding their allotted natural lifetime, their genetics eventually break down and literally decompose over time, and they require injections of fresh genetic sections injected into their own. So, and that's another vector of chimerism and psychopathy and fragmentation. And another side note, these people are also our ancestors. So yeah, so that you could figure that into our overall state as well. So once you understand that an embryo represents a potential timeline, and you can imagine these what if machine simulator systems, then you can start to imagine that through artificial selection, there's a breeding program. You can imagine there being a breeding program to match certain genetic lines, certain potentiality spectrums, to purposely produce specifically curated realities. Meaning the breeding program is to create specifically curated realities in the form of an embryos. Genetic programs that would combine genetic lines to create different potential reality timelines, so that you could be actually steering your simulators through higher dimensional potential timeline spectrums through these controlled breeding programs. So the embryos, the genetics, are like the coal that drives the engine of the simulator. It's powered by embryos, genetics. And beyond the old school, mundane, brute force methods, alien abductions, military abductions, medical interventions, etc., being used to covertly or openly obtain the reproductive materials from the selected individuals for the breeding program. Beyond that old way, the next generation is much smoother, much more streamlined, and much more successful, where through mediating, gatekeeping, and steering people, influencing them, and secretly sabotaging or matchmaking behind the Iron Curtain through social media, dating apps, etc., through the Iron Curtain of technology, like through social media, dating apps, even email, text, phone calls, whatever, with virtually all human interaction passing through this inscrutable black box of technological mediums and the internet, through subtle manipulations using artificial intelligence, just nudging people through subtle manipulations and using artificial intelligence. You can manipulate the attention and emotions, that, again, subtly, to steer the breeding program, to create the genetic matches you wish to create, to produce the timelines or realities you wish to create. And beyond that, you could even make natural conception difficult, theoretically, through chemical, electronic means, or even just through supposedly inadvertent cycle mistiming through subtle behavioral conditioning, subliminals, arousal, de-arousal, and encourage abortion or IVF or any other artificial means of obtaining embryos. So, yeah, so any way to obtain off the books embryos, unique genetic sequences, this resource, because even though they may be killed or destroyed, the genetics are cloned, resurrected to be used as slaves underground, since the underworld cannot create new genetic patterns. It can only replicate them. But as long as the pattern is known and it's recorded or whatever, you can always be cloned or resurrected or whatever. And basically the underworld or underground, from our perspective, one way of looking at it is just as a virtual realm in these simulators. The underworld to us would always be basically a virtual realm to us, just like from above us, our level would be a virtual underworld. So abortion is necessary to create quote unquote off the books unique genetic sequences or personages to populate the underworld without arousing alarm or suspicion by abducting too many from the surface world. And the babies represent the birth of a new consciousness, which must be sacrificed in order to continue the current material incarnation. And in the same way that babies which are sacrificed from this level of existence are materially manifest in the next lower incepted layer of material incarnation, correspondingly, we who exist on this plane of incarnation are manifestations of the aborted genetic material from the layer of existence directly above and preceding ours, so that the entire virtually infinitely tiered Dante's Inferno-esque funnel of material incarnation is sustained by a perpetual trickling down of purified souls, represented by fresh genetic information from the highest to the lowest layers in a genetic trickle-down economics death spiral, eventually pooling in the pools of Sheol, which is like the boiler room, and under pressure and heat, being purified, evaporating again all the way up to the top of the system, condensing into eternal personalities again, and raining down, trickling down through the system again, over and over in this closed system. Because this whole thing is still just all really just still within this material system, even though it's like seems like it's virtually infinitely tiered. It always looks like that from inside. And just side note, you can imagine abortion typically just being one embryo. You can imagine, like I said, you could make natural conception difficult in certain pairings that you arranged if you want a wider spectrum of that particular variety. Like you want more variations in that particular timeline potentiality spectrum. You could steer that breeding pair into IVF, which just an example, but maybe you might create 10, 20, 50, 100 different embryos, off the books embryos that are never actually going to be born as living people on this plane of existence, but you might want them as off the books for embryonic timelines. So in IVF you might create a lot more of these embryos that can be used in this off the books demigod simulator system. And the reason that it's off the books is because the actual primary actualized timeline, which is guided or determined by who is actually born, is very tightly monitored and controlled by the higher ups and higher and higher and higher ups in the infinite hierarchy. So the demigods, who are basically the managerial class of the realm, are forced to work within that grand plan of the primary actualized timeline and honor that and implement that through the breeding program by causing the proper or destined people to be born. But the demigods, who again are literally just people at heart, take liberties or have wiggle room within that master program to also use the AI-controlled breeding program to also create off-the-books embryonic timelines, which are not brought to fruition, but are harvested as unactualized potential timelines through means like abortion or IVF. And those unique genetic sequences that were created can be used to power the time-dilated simulated realms and explore or exploit these artificially curated timelines in the off-the-map or off-the-books simulations. And again, in the case of IVF, it may not just be one, but be 10, 20, 50, 100 off-the-books embryonic timelines might be created from one breeding pair, representing a whole spectrum of unactualized potential timelines to power simulations, which were, underworld simulations, which were never ever meant to exist in actuality, which is allowed by the higher and higher and higher ups, because to intervene would be a violation of our free will. And the reason it would be a violation of our free will is because everyone is implicitly or at certain times explicitly aware of this going on. We all implicitly approve of this just by being a part of this society and existence, which we all are, unless you're completely cut off, living like an animal in a wild environment, or just not participating in existence, which I'm not like encouraging or anything. I'm just saying that's how it is. We're all implicitly aware of this, and there's people who don't participate in existence. That's what schizophrenic catatonia is. Someone who just completely says, nope, I'm out, just out. Like, without going out into the wilderness, they just check out of existence. I don't mean suicide or anything either. I mean literally just, turning off. And again, so we all agree to this somewhat. It doesn't have to be as bad as it sounds either. It's just all ultimately still just like a thought experiment, which I'll get to later, but it's what our whole existence is, basically. But we're all implicitly aware of it, that this is how it works, and that these things have always been necessary. Child sacrifice or abortion or all these weird technological things, they're necessary to keep, for financial reasons or whatever, to keep society or your personal life or whatever moving along as it has to. And it's something we're all responsible for. It's not like one person, oh, you had an abortion. That's not what I mean at all. Like, it's, yeah, everything I'm talking about is a completely collective thing. That's the level that I'm talking about things on. And we're all implicitly aware of it, just like even if you don't think you are, there's always lots of things. Just because you don't know about it or remember right now, there's a ton of things that no one wants to remember or know about most of the time or any of the time, but you only become aware of when some other association accidentally bumps you into the sharp corner of a piece of furniture, and you are aware of it again all of a sudden. It's like something you locked away in a dark room, and by some association, you got trying to get to the other side of that room, you accidentally bumped into it again like a sharp corner, and you remember that all the shit is down here that you locked in the fucking basement. And, you know, you get out of there immediately because it's scary. But other than that short time, I'm just saying there can be infinite things that you're aware of, but you're not consciously focusing on or remembering at the time, other than when you bump into it accidentally or drawn through it through some circumstance. And at certain points, everyone is explicitly aware of it, like at the crossover point of cycles, when everyone at that point is explicitly aware of what's going on and is diverted or shuttled off into whatever direction they're going to go to for the next phase of the cycle or whatever. And yeah, that basically what we're implicitly aware of and agreeing to, and explicitly at that point, is that's what life is. Like, it would be a violation for the higher and higher ups to interfere with this process, because actually this managerial class, the demigods, they might want to be real gods, or they eventually want to be people. That's what they want to be again, is people. Normal people again. So everyone has it in their interest to push along the next revolution of the cycle, so they have another chance to cycle back through again and be a normal person again and cycle out the proper way. Maybe. Either way, they want to be a person again. And basically we all want to do life again, or we did. That's why it would be a violation of our free will, because we all want to play this game, or we put our attention into this thought when we thought for a second, well, what if it wasn't like that? What if it was like this? What if it could go forever by itself and it was self-sustaining? And that's life. That's what we agreed to and we wanted, and that's why it would be a violation. It has to run its course, and we have to take our attention off it naturally because we chose to do life. And that's what life is. Life is, an animal with a brain-eating parasite smashing its head into a rock, or a chimpanzee taking pleasure in one by one, just for fun, pulling the limbs off a smaller monkey and beating it on the ground, or forcible rape or some shit of animals, or an alligator crunching giant turtle shells like potato chips, or whatever you can imagine. Lions just killing hyenas not to eat. Animals do things all the time for just entertainment, sport, and the more intelligent we become, and as we begin to develop, that's what life is. The goal of all life is to extinguish all life. The ultimate objective of life is decomposition. But it is opposed by a equal oppositional force that we created, which is a mechanical compulsion to regenerate in degenerative cycles, recursive loops, to keep the system going in a way that it was never designed to and is actually impossible. But again, none of it is, you know the whole thing. We'll get into it again another time. But that's what life is. But that's what I mean by life, but I don't mean like what life could be. I don't mean existence or just being and creating and growing. When I say it would be a violation of our free will because we all chose life or this realm or this thought experiment, that's what I mean when I say life. I mean this mode of existence, that we don't have really good words for it, but I don't mean all existence. I mean like this mode of existence that we have here. Back to the main thing. So that ultimately, if you are the demigods in control of the technology, you would actually have a completely automated, streamlined guidance and control system for guiding the population genetically through hyperdimensional timeline spectrums at will, like a giant cosmic level consciousness spaceship powered by the ignorance and lusts of humanity. And the idea of what is possible, the capability of technology always being the same, there always being the same technological capability, but what is changing is just our understanding of it, is like the externalization of the hierarchy idea, where everything we see happening in society is not actually what is happening. It is actually showing us or explaining to us how things have always been. So even though now we have these out in the open breeding programs like dating apps and social media, etc., I mean, there's no way around it. That's literally what it is. It's a machine intelligence literally determining who is going to be a breeding pair with who. That's literally what it is. It's completely. So even though we have these out in the open breeding programs for everyone to observe, that's actually how it's always been. But we had to be walked through the exoteric narrative of technological advancement for us to become able to understand how that's possible. And it's not even so much that it's not even so much becoming able to understand how it's possible. It's more just like being able to accept that is possible. Like, you could imagine like a cell phone. There's probably no one in the world that understands everything about how a cell phone works. There's people that understand the like broader theoretical concepts. There's people that understand engineering of different parts, but they might not they don't understand how each component is manufactured. but someone who does understand how to manufacture certain components doesn't know everything about radio frequency and frequency modulation and the transmission end of everything, and the person who engineers the frequency modulation might not understand everything about manufacturing lithium batteries, and there's engineers that understand how to put all these components together, but that they don't understand the minutia of the workings of each component. And so it's not actually that we have to understand how it works. It's more just that we have to be able to accept that it's possible and it works, by being led through that continuity. We need the continuity of the appearance of technological advancement to for us to be able to accept what is the actual technological capabilities. So it looks like this highly advanced technological breeding program, which steers our reality, has come together and assembled itself in the industrial age. And it seems we've watched it all come together. But in reality, this is how it has always worked. And the whole historical epic of technological advancement is a contrived charade, which is actually for our benefit. I mean, it's debatable what that even means, for our benefit, but the whole charade of technological advancement is for our benefit, to gradually lead us along a path from an infantile state, step by step, to allow us to finally, at the end of the cycle, hopefully, reach a level of sophistication and intelligence where we can actually understand how this system we are in has always worked. Basically, like all of history, through the genetic continuity of consciousness, is actually more like a training course or an educational or instructional interactive video series or something like that, like something like a tutorial. So that throughout history, our perception of this clandestine force manipulating circumstances or intervening directly, if necessary, to enact and enforce this program, our perception of the program changes to match the current age. Where originally the Greek gods, or whatever pantheon of gods or demigods or angels or whatever, are not just interbreeding with human women and men, but influencing human pairings indirectly or directly. I'm not going to pull up examples, but if you have any familiarity with obviously Genesis 6 or Greek mythology, or the mythology of any religion, really it's ubiquitous. It happens all the time. Not just the interbreeding, but also the influencing of pairings. So that was the conception of it that was consistent with that age. And then the dark underbelly of it is the gods demanding child sacrifice in order to obtain off the books genetics. You also, using temple prostitutes, arranged marriage, and a million other subtler means, both mundane and exotic, to enact specific genetic pairings. Alien abductions, which frequently focus on harvesting or implanting reproductive material, are one of the more modern conceptions, attempting to account for the occasional but inexplicable intrusions into the general population's normally insulated conscious awareness of this clandestine program. Mosquitoes, ticks, and a whole host of other insects, parasites, and microorganisms serve as an integrated continuous feedback mechanism for the automated system. By discreetly extracting blood samples and injecting genetic packets, it is possible to continually test, monitor, and make small alterations to the genetic pool of the population. To say nothing of more obvious and acknowledged methods, such as medical interventions, injections, blood samples, and other genetic samples taken either voluntarily or forcefully by public, medical, military, or law enforcement institutions, or by private corporations. From a point of central control, the automated system, with backdoor access to all communication networks, infrastructure, transport systems, social media, entertainment vectors, digital commerce, virtual education, virtual business meetings, etc. The automated system is able to influence, alter, and control the behavior, emotions, and circumstances of every member of the population. Through minor tweaking of these systems, millions or billions of tiny changes accumulate to achieve the desired result. As long as these changes are tiny but ubiquitous, without causing any major disruptions to the system at large, very few would ever become aware of the seemingly omnipotent guiding force, which makes it possible for highly abstract goals devised by people to be implemented universally by an automated system. And just as an example, side note of highly abstract goals being implemented by an automated system, we can just start to imagine now with things like ChatGPT and whatever other large language models, Claude and whatever else there is. Not how it is now, but we can imagine as it continues to advance. It's basically like an extrapolation machine and elaboration machine, like beyond anything we could have understood before we became familiar with that. But if you imagine the continuing development of large language models in the future, we can start to imagine how an entire history could be fabricated from abstract instructions, like simple prompts. Like, I want this type of history with this theme and these few key events, and we can start to understand how an automated system like this could generate all these texts, all this backstory, all this history from fairly simple and really abstract goals that are devised by people, like demigods, but what are essentially just people. Again, not how it is now. Like, I'm not saying it's like that now, but we can imagine, if we extrapolate out, how that can become possible, especially in conjunction with everything else. Like, obviously visual things, audio things, recordings, 3D, imagine 3D printing, like how we know it now. It's really crude, but imagine it continues to advance, and it advances from shooting strings of plastic to becoming more and more refined, and we can imagine molecular printing, atomic printing, in conjunction with language generation, automation, and image generation, and everything. You can imagine how a completely automated system can assemble itself that could basically allow a person to generate an entire history for a society. In the service of the breeding program, this system may be used to cultivate certain attractions, inclinations, and proclivities in certain people or groups of people, or alternately to instill a sense of disgust or aversion towards particular people or groups or types of people. This can be done through personalized messages in media, or simply through scheduling of programming, a missed call or text, or a fabricated call or text, childhood exposure to material which later will manifest as sexual preferences or fetishes. One could be made to miss a traffic light, preventing that person from ever meeting someone that they otherwise would have connected with. Or a meeting of two people could be engineered by the same method. A declined credit card, a parking ticket, an impactful image imprinted onto the subconscious. The possibilities are virtually infinite. I'm just gonna shoehorn in here also, like, the idea of like needing to implant surgically a microchip or some transmitter in the brain physically seems ridiculous. Even though that may be really where the technological development is in the exoteric narrative of technological development, but the idea that it wouldn't be possible to monitor neural activity like remotely through some external device that were frequently around, like just like Wi-Fi signals or Bluetooth or a cell phone or anything, and you could even extrapolate, like that's how we think of things now, but you could imagine even just systems like facial recognition systems. We are currently conditioned to think of them as like just recognizing people, but you could imagine that same technology where there is no even direct monitoring or interaction of brainwaves or anything, but that same technology of simply just like facial recognition technology being advanced a little more and refined a little more to the point where just by micro expressions of your face or body, or flushing of the skin, hair raising, really minute, just visual cues, you could actually develop machine learning algorithms that could extrapolate out from these subtler and subtler, just literally visual cues, where it could actually reverse engineer the neural activity. And it doesn't even need to directly monitor neural activity. It can be extrapolated purely from a non-invasive, just like literally visual monitoring by such minute analysis of visual cues or auditory cues, things in your voice, just the way the sound of your pulse, the sound of your bones moving, or your hair, or anything, the way your body moves. So it's not really realistic to think that the only way that a computerized monitoring and influencing feedback system could work is by surgically implanting, like a barbarian doing a trepanning or whatever, blasting a hole through your skull physically. It's kind of ridiculous, I think, to imagine that that's the only way you could have this electromagnetic interaction with the nervous system. So the possibilities are endless for this subtle but cumulative effect of influencing people, the behavior of people on a large scale by a central automated system. There's, the limit's just your imagination. What methods could be employed, and that's just the more mundane possibilities. Those who are so inclined might consider even more arcane and fantastic methods like dream manipulation or other remote electromagnetic stimulation of the brain and central nervous system, induction of behavior via pheromones or other chemical means, insertion of intelligent parasites, microorganisms, and micromachines, individual and mass hypnosis, and even direct intervention by special operators whose movements and methods are currently entirely opaque and unfathomable to us. Although it seems to us that this system of control is only made possible by the advent of advanced technology, in reality, the rate of public technological advancement is carefully regulated and retarded in order to maintain a sufficient level of advancement of understanding in the population. Because if technological advancement were allowed to accelerate too far beyond the abilities of a sufficient proportion of the population's advancement in intelligence and a sufficient proportion of the population's ability to keep pace and accept and incorporate that understanding into our understanding of existence at large. Basically, if technological advancement is allowed to run away too fast beyond the ability of like most people to, keep up with it, and again, it's not exactly understanding like the technicalities of it, it's more like being able to accept that it works, just like how you're able to accept the use of a cell phone or whatever, where people in the past it would seem magical. So if technological advancement is allowed to run away faster than the ability of the population to advance in intelligence, then the true mechanics of this existence would remain forever elusive and magical to us. What is magical is what has accelerated beyond the pace of our understanding. It's accelerated beyond our ability to accept it and integrate it into our understanding of existence. So it is true on one level that we have observed the apparently deliberate self-assembly of this system within this industrial society, which has emerged within our own historical consciousness. And it's true that these technological means are the mechanism of this program or control system from our current layer, age, and level of understanding. But as technological advancement continues and our interface with it becomes more sensitive and refined, as its use becomes an indistinguishable extension of our natural physical action, and its potency and application approach universality, our understanding of it will be gradually pulled into unison with our realization that this is the same control which has always been innate and fundamental to the nature of this realm of existence. And that unifying or pulling into unison of our understanding of technological capability being pulled into unison with like this realization of that is how this realm has always worked innately. Not innate, I don't know if you would say innately, but as our understanding of technological advancement gets pulled into unison with the realization that that highest level of technological capability is identical to how this realm of existence has always worked, that occurrence is another way of looking at what is commonly referred to as the singularity. Regarding the need to manually manage both the rate of technological advancement and the rate of realization within the population or individual members of the population. At a certain point in the advancement of realization, a threshold is crossed, an inflection point, past which everything also means everything else, which obviously means the game is over. Therefore, this realization curve must be managed manually to prevent the game from dissolving prematurely before the primary timeline or storyline can be expressed. It ruins the game, basically. And that runaway realization of everything also means everything else is like the last curtain that shall not ever be pulled back, lest the universe wink out. Because the realization process, which is ported in through higher realms, like funneled down, like through all these realms, like layers of latex or something, and pushing your finger down through all of them, but infinitely thin and infinitely flexible. So it's like you're all actually outside of the whole system, but pushing your finger down through all these layers of latex until you touch down all the way at the bottom on the material plane. And you feel like you're really there, but it's really like being in like a infinitely layered full body condom or something like that, metaphorically. But because that awareness, the realization process is part of that. It's organic awareness, which is ported in from outside the system through higher realms and funneled in. Due to its the organic aspect of it, it's unpredictable. It's completely unpredictable within the system and does not proceed, the realization curve does not proceed at a regular rate, but it can slow to a relative crawl seemingly for centuries or millennia, or it can advance it exponentially in days, minutes, or seconds, in some cases, collapsing the universal experience. Therefore, personalities must manually adjust and manage this realization factor in order to maintain the integrity of the arch timeline. So, yeah, the technological advancement, both, it's like a mirror of the internal realization of the nature of existence within the population. These two things, because of their ported in nature from the higher realms outside of this system, it's completely unpredictable in here, and it results in regular but unpredictable explosions. Where regular but unpredictable, I mean, like, there's no way to tell when it's going to happen from within the system. It's an unknown variable, but you know it's going to happen repeatedly. So it needs to be repeatedly manually corrected. And this can be interpreted from our perspective within the sim as the prevention of the spread of a mind virus or reality-rotting infection by dividing into separate cultures and segregating human consciousness into groups in order to contain and extract infected segments or cultures to prevent widespread contamination and universal collapse. And even erasure or rewinding and overwriting and replaying of timelines in order to retroactively contain the realization spread at a point in the past after universal collapse has already occurred. In effect, reconstituting the universe ex nihilo, or from nothing, just by fiat, or from scratch, in order to correct the progress of the arch timeline. This was necessary due to the completely unpredictable, sometimes instantaneous, runaway advancement of the realization factor, or this like runaway realization explosion event that happens from time to time and collapses the universe. Could also be sort of encapsulated in the meme of like everything is fake, or everything also means everything else. Or you could call it universal both-neitherism. The anachronological, archaeological, latent subconscious, whatever you want to call it, psychological, ontological, eschatological residue of these repeated necessary interventions, which to us are like what I would call tower collapse, like Babel, Tower of Babel, Atlantis, whatever other names people have for these events. Like, they're just like placeholders for us and our subconscious and our like collective subconscious and everything. Lemuria, Atlantis, maybe even Egypt, or like the Toltecs or whatever civilization we imagine. But this intervention and resetting are what caused the apparent evidence of repeated instances of rapid advancement to an impossibly high level of transcendental technological advancement, immediately followed by an abrupt and total catastrophic collapse and erasure from history. Even though technically these previous periods of advancement never actually occurred in this universe, as each time this abrupt runaway advancement occurs, it necessitates a total universal collapse and a chronological rollback, or a rolled back reconstitution of the universe by the intervening higher and higher ups, with these artifacts of prior dead universes or collapsed or extinguished universes, like previous versions. These artifacts of these previous universes are being unavoidably ported in. That's why we think we remember them in like our collective unconscious. And even archaeological finds, we can even find what seems to be like physical evidence of these things sometimes, but it's always ambiguous. It will never violate the law of eternal ambiguity, but that's why they always pop up, even though that never actually happened here. It never happened in this universe. That universe is a completely other universe than the one we're in. But it's unavoidably ported in or piggybacking in on the hard-coded like genetic or collective memory of the human consciousness complex or apparatus, which must be preserved and bridged across these various universal segments of the primary arch timeline. So basically, there's personalities, or just forces we could just say are unknown to us, unknowable and opaque to us mostly. But these higher and higher ups have to literally manually maintain this sense of continuity by sort of bridging the gap between all these like shells of universes. It's like making a bridge, like stepping stone bridge or something, out of all these universal segments of all these previously collapsed universes. And it's like they have to align them properly, like setting bricks or Legos or puzzle pieces or something. So when we look back, we feel like we have this continuity, but the realization and technological uncontrolled explosions have to be edited out. So that universe must be basically collapsed and closed out and rolled back, started again, but we need the continuity. So there's higher and higher ups that must basically bridge the gap between all these universal segments. As this artificial or manually constructed and managed continuity of the collective human consciousness is necessary for the successful fulfillment or completion of the primary arch timeline.